What if the deadliest weapon in the Iraq War was not hidden underground in Baghdad, but spoken aloud on television, repeated until the whole world believed it?
Breaking news, the situation is devolving.
Sources confirm the merger is off.
Tune in tonight as we discuss the implications for the upcoming election.
I still remember the sound of the TV more clearly than the sound of the bombs. It was early 2003, winter in the United States, and every evening my small living room glowed blue with breaking news banners. Red, white, and blue graphics slid across the screen. Serious men in dark suits pointed at satellite images. Words like imminent threat, weapons of mass destruction, and smoking gun were repeated so often they stopped sounding like words and started sounding like facts. I was in my late 20s then. I worked a regular job, paid my bills, argued about gas prices, and worried about nothing bigger than rent. Like millions of others, I was still carrying the shock of 9/11 in my chest. Fear had become a familiar companion, quiet, constant, and easily stirred. The government said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, maybe even nuclear ones. They said he could strike our allies. They said he could hand these weapons to terrorists. They said we couldn't wait. And I believed them. Most of us did. The first cracks didn't come from Iraq. They came from doubt. One night, after another press conference, my friend, Mark, who had served in the Gulf War in the 1990s, shook his head and said, "Something doesn't add up." He talked about UN weapons inspectors, about how Iraq had been under sanctions and surveillance for years, about how inspectors on the ground weren't finding what the headlines promised. But his voice was drowned out by urgency. The news showed Colin Powell at the United Nations holding up a small vial, an image burned into history. He spoke calmly, confidently, as if the evidence was undeniable. Charts, audio recordings, satellite photos of alleged mobile bioweapons labs. The message was clear. They have the weapons, and if we don't act now, we will regret it. The problem wasn't just misinformation. The problem was certainty, manufactured, rehearsed, and broadcast as truth. Then the war began. Shock and awe, they called it. On television, Baghdad lit up like a thunderstorm of fire. Missiles streaked through the night sky. Anchors spoke with controlled excitement, as if narrating a high-stakes sports event. Military analysts stood in front of digital maps, explaining troop movements like chess strategies. I watched soldiers my age move across deserts I had never seen. I watched statues fall. I watched words like liberation replace invasion. But the weapons never appeared. Weeks passed, then months. Every day, reporters asked the same question: where are the weapons of mass destruction? The answers became vague. They'll be found soon. They were moved. They were hidden better than expected. Meanwhile, American soldiers died. Iraqi civilians died. Cities were reduced to rubble. The war didn't end, it mutated. Insurgency, car bombs, sectarian violence. And still, no weapons. The certainty that once filled the screen began to dissolve into excuses. The moment everything broke for me came quietly, not with an explosion, but with a sentence. David Kay, the man appointed to lead the search for WMDs in Iraq, stood before Congress and said, "We were almost all wrong. No stockpiles, no active nuclear program, No biological weapons ready for use.
15th of May?
Wrong. That word echoed louder than any bomb. Then more truth followed, slowly, painfully. Intelligence had been cherry-picked. Doubts were suppressed. Warnings from experts were ignored. Fear had been used as fuel. The biggest lie behind the Iraq War wasn't just that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It was the claim that there was no choice, that war was the only option, that questioning was unpatriotic, that urgency justified everything. I felt betrayed, not just by politicians, but by my own silence. I had watched, I had nodded, I had trusted, and trust had been weaponized. Years have passed since then. The war officially ended, but its consequences never did. Hundreds of thousands dead, a region destabilized, new extremist groups rising from the chaos, veterans returning home, carrying wounds no camera could show. Sometimes I think back to that living room, to the blue glow of the television, to how easily fear slid into belief. The biggest lie behind the Iraq War wasn't hidden in a bunker. It lived in language, in repetition, in the promise that power tells the truth when it speaks loudly enough. The lesson I carry now is simple, but heavy. Truth does not shout. Truth does not rush you. And when leaders tell you there is no time to question, that is exactly when you must. Because the most dangerous weapons are not made of chemicals or steel. They are made of certainty, without proof, and a population afraid enough to believe it.